We're working on the second part of section test 5, number, it's a test 5 in your book, but it's, it's obviously labeled test 4 out of the 4. And you guys had worked on up through 20, and I had only gotten through 13 when we worked on them in class. So that's as far as I got as far as going over stuff with you guys. So, and this would be, so I'm starting on page 803. And if the Zamboni machine fires up here, we'll close the door so it doesn't get loud in here. Okay, so what kind of information do I need to pay attention to here? Let's move this over here. In a survey, 607 general surgeons and orthopedic surgeons indicated their major professional activity. The results are summarized in the table above. If one of the surgeons is selected at random, which of the following is closest to the probability that the selected surgeon is an orthopedic surgeon whose indicated professional activity is research? So orthopedic surgeon, indicated research. So that's important. Does it specify that we are only going to choose out of the research category? Or are we talking about all? Are we talking about all of the surgeons? I believe it's all. If one of the surgeons, it's not specifying anything else. So they're not saying, if I'm only choosing from the research surgeon category, what's the probability? Because then my total would be 230. But obviously my total is going to be 607. So let's see here. What is 74 divided by 607? That's got to be a little bit over 10%, right? Because 60 over 600 would be 10%. So I'm really going to kind of guess that one's the right one. This is page 803. Now we're moving on to page 804. Polling agency recently surveyed 1,000 adults who were selected at random from a large city and asked each of the students, are you satisfied with the quality of air in the city? Of those surveyed, 78% responded that they were satisfied with the quality of the air in the city. Based on the results of the survey, which of the following statements must be true? Okay. Of all adults in the city, 78% are satisfied with the quality of air in the city. Is that true?
No, because they only surveyed 1,000.
Right, they didn't survey everybody. I mean, that would get really expensive. So they can't do that. So this statement is not true. We can't say of all the adults in the city. If another 1,000 adults selected at random from the city were surveyed, 78% of them would report they are satisfied with the quality of air in the city. Or if 1,000 adults selected at random from a different city were surveyed, I highly doubt if we go to a different city, we're going to get 78%. Okay? That's not what this polling agency, so the big question is, can we decide if 2 is correct? Do you think if I just go out and pick another 1,000 adults randomly, that 78% of them would report they are satisfied? I don't know that. Let me look at this again. A polling agency recent. My inclination is none. Polling agency recently surveyed 1,000 adults who were selected at random from a large city and asked each of the adults, are you satisfied? Of those surveyed, okay, so we did get, so they are saying the 1,000, 78% responded that they were satisfied. I don't know if we did that for another 1,000, we'd get that to happen. My thoughts are none. I'm going to look this one up just because I want to make sure I highly doubt that you get that same result. It might be close, but to get it 78% exactly? Come on, one of these days I'm going to get there. Which one was this? 15? 15, yeah, the answer is A, none. I didn't think you'd get that to happen. That was a little bit on the sketchy side. So we got species of trees. One method of calculating the approximate age in years of a particular tree is to multiply the diameter. So multiply the diameter in inches by a constant called the growth factor. Okay, we'll just say D times G. The table above gives the growth factors for 8 species of trees. According to the information in the table, what is the approximate age of an American elm tree with 12 inches in diameter? American elm, so that would be times 4, looks like 48. Okay, so let's see what happens with question 17. The scatter plot above gives the tree diameter plotted against age for 26 trees of a single species. The growth factor of the species is closest to that of which of the following species of tree? Okay. Do we think that the slope of that line is going to be useful to us? Okay. So let's just take 100 and follow it over and come down. Approximately. If this is 100 divided by 14, what would that be? I'm just trying to think the rate of change here. Or I might be doing that wrong. Let's not do it that way because I feel like I'm going the wrong direction. Maybe that's good, maybe that's not. But I know that 14, 100, let's pick a point like that, and then, I don't know, 120. What do you think? What are we going to estimate 120 at? Do you think it's all the way to 17, or do you think it's a 16 and a half? I'm just gonna throw 16 and a half in there as my estimate, and let's see here. So difference in the y values would be 20. Difference in the x values would be 2.5. So what do you get? 20 over 2.5. 20 over 2.5. I got 8. Is that one of those really cool things up there? 7.5. Shagbark hickory. That sounds like a winner there. Okay. So great question. Let me zoom in on that. And so when I like to find my slope.
120. I thought that was 170.
Oh, sorry. My bad. My bad. Good question. Good question. So we're subtracting these, right? That gives me the 120 over 100. And then that's where so you saw where the 2.5 came from?
Yeah.
From there? Okay. All right. Any questions so far? We ended up with 8, which is close to the 7.5 for shagbark hickory. If a white birch tree and a pin oak tree each now have a diameter of 1 foot, okay, which of the following will be the closest to the difference of their diameters 10 years from now? Okay, so I should pay more attention. Birch and pin oak. Okay, birch and pin oak. So if I take that, river birch and pin oak, so that would be 3.5 times 12.
Mr. Staley, it says white
And
birch.
3 times 12. They want the difference between those. Now, before you go calculating things, I'm wondering if you see that it's really 0.5 times 12. The difference between them is going to be 6. Did I grab the wrong tree? White birch. Thank you. Yeah, I hate it when I script like that. Yeah. Well, glad you stopped me. So it's a great answer to the wrong question. White birch. Okay, so 5 times 12. So it's really 2 times 12 or 24? If I had to take a guess there.
Like 10 years ago.
So we've got growth factor. So this gives approximate. Okay, so how does that come into play here? Calculating age of the tree is to multiply the diameter of the tree in inches by a constant called the growth factor for that species. What is the approximate age of a tree? Okay, so we've got to figure in the age. How much does that play a part? So is this going to be a change for diameter times growth factor? What am I missing here? I'm not looking at the answers. Maybe I should look at the answers. Which of the following will be closest to the difference in inches of their diameters 10 years from now? One method of calculating approximate age in years. Okay, maybe I'm doing this all wrong. Back up and think. What are we seeing? What are we seeing that I'm not seeing at the moment? So I guess diameter times, if I take the diameter times the growth factor, that gives the current age. Okay, so the current age of the white birch is 60, and the pin oak was 12 times 3 or 36. So that's their current age. 10 years from now, obviously we will be dealing with 70 and 46. So if we work our way backwards, it will be diameter times the growth factor 5 and diameter times the growth factor 3. So 70 divided by 5 is what? 14. Okay, so the diameter of that tree will be 14, and 46 divided by 3 is 15.3. So the difference between them is 1.3. That makes a whole lot more sense. Always got to pay attention to those special right triangles because they're going to come up somewhere. Good thing is on the SAT they give you those special right triangles at the beginning of the test. ACT, no. You got to know your stuff when you're taking the ACT. That's a rough test. In triangle ABC above, what's the length of AD? Well, if it's a 30, 60, 90, how do you go from the hypotenuse to the short leg? Divided by 2, that's correct. All right. The three sides of a 30, 60, 90 triangle look like this. X, x radical 3, and 2x. Those are the short, medium, and long sides of the triangle. So it shouldn't be too hard for you to kind of even put them in, even if you didn't go back and look at the beginning, but that would be useful. So if DC is 6, what's the length of AD? Shouldn't it be the same? Right, because we're talking about a 30, 60, 90 right triangle. It's an isosceles triangle, so actually it's an equilateral triangle. 60, 60, 60. Anyway. Question 20. For you Algebra 2 fans out there, this isn't something that you've talked about yet. Okay, so if you're in the trig class, this will make more sense to you or above. But if you are in Algebra 2, then, you know, this will be a little bit of a stretch, but not too bad, and at least I don't think. We had a teacher here at Homestead that did this. He's a retired teacher now, but he actually built a wheel just like this. And in that wheel, he embedded a flashlight. So where this black dot is right here, he actually embedded a flashlight at the end. Okay? And then he shut off the lights in his room, and he rolled this wheel that he had built. It was wooden, and he rolled it across the room in the dark with the flashlight on. And what you'll see is that the flashlight would do this as it rolled across the room. It followed that path of a sine wave. Anytime you're taking circular motion and changing it into linear motion, that's what you're going to end up with. So the figure on the left above shows the wheel, right? The graph of that function on the right could represent which of the following as a function of time from when the wheel began to roll. Okay, now notice that it is going down. Sorry. It's going down, then up, then down, then up, then down, then up, then down, then up. And it's going to do that for a long time, according to this graph. What about that dot is moving down and up? Is it the speed? Is it going faster than slower, then faster than slower? No, it's not the speed. Is it the distance that the wheel is from the starting point? Well, kind of. The distance of the mark on the rim from the center of the wheel? Or is it the distance of the mark on the rim from the ground? It's got to be this last one, and the reason it's got to be the last one is because it starts out at its highest point, it comes all the way down as it's coming around, touches the ground, it goes back to its highest point. Then it goes back to the ground, and then it goes back to its high. So it's the vertical distance that we're talking about. It's not the distance from a starting point. It's not the distance from the center of the wheel. If it was the center of the wheel, I believe your graph would be shifted down from that. But because it starts out high and goes to 0 and then goes back up and then to 0 and go back up, you're talking about the distance to the ground. If it was from the center of the wheel, you'd have, well, that would be weird. Your wheel might have to be moving underground. You guys have not gotten to these questions, have you? Okay, so I want to pause the video, and I want you to take all right, let's see how we did. In the equation above, if A is negative and B is positive. So what do you think I did? What does it look like I did? Yeah, just picked some numbers and plugged them in. So I picked -1 for A and +2 for B. It really wouldn't matter as long as you just picked some numbers and plugged them in. So I got -3 over -1. So what's my C value? 3. Well, it's obviously not those two. And I didn't get a negative number, so I think that's the winner. Just have to pick some numbers, plug them in, and see what happened. Okay, question 22 in State X. Mr. Camp's 8th grade class, consisting of 26 students, was surveyed, and 34.6% of the students reported that they had at least 2 siblings. Okay, so key phrase here to remember is at least 2 siblings. Okay, the average 8th grade class in the state is 26. If the students in Mr. Camp's class are representative of students in the 8th grade, state's 8th grade classes, and there are 1,800 8th grade classes in the state, which of the following best estimates the number of people in the state who have fewer? Pay attention to that. When they measured the information in the class, they came up with 34.6 that had at least 2 siblings. As soon as they ask me the question, they flip it around on me. So what's the percentage of the people in that one 8th grade class that have fewer than 2 siblings? If 34.6 had at least 2 siblings, what percentage had less than that? Equal to or at least would be 2 or more. So state would have fewer than 2 siblings. Why didn't they just say 1 sibling or no siblings? I guess you got those 2 options. So that's probably true. Any takers on that percentage? 65.4%. Okay. Which I kind of wrote there. So I took the 1,800 classes, multiplied by 26 students in every class to get the number of students total, and then multiplied by the 65.4. And what's that give me? Is that the 30,600? Something like that. Was that right? Yeah, okay. I typed it out earlier, but I lost it. Okay, so they have this Townsend Realty Company. They got the purchase prices, the rental prices. They want to know a linear function that is going to predict the how many people out there started plugging in numbers. Of course you did, because that's what they want you to do. The big question is, what the heck does, oops, got to lock it in place. What does that mean? How does that change what I plug in? Yeah. So you want to make a coordinate out of it. It's 128 for X and 950 for Y, so to speak. And when you plug those in, the only one that works is choice D. So just had to pay attention to that so you weren't super frustrated because you didn't know what was going on. Well, I guess it really wouldn't matter. I mean, you'd end up with a, well, it might look weird and you might get frustrated. So the Townsend Realty purchased the Glenview Street property and received a 40% discount. If you receive a 40% discount, what percent are you paying? 60%. After that, they said, hey, because you're paying cash, we'll take another 20% off of that price. Now, folks, that's not 20% off of the original price. That's 20% off of the sale price. There's a difference. And people like Kohl's Shopping Center, Kohl's store, they know there's a difference when they start throwing those things at you like Kohl's Cash and this percentage off. And they know that. They know how to play the game. So if you take that additional 20% off, that means you're paying 80% of the discounted price. So 40% off gives me 60% of the original. And then I'm paying 80% of that discounted price. All in all, what percentage of the original am I paying? What is 0.8 times 0.6? 0.48. I'm paying 48% of the original price. So how are you going to solve that for the original price? You're probably going to divide, right? And if you divide, you'll get 291,700, or pretty doggone close, or something like that. So you have to keep in mind that when they're taking percentages off, it's about what you are paying. Well, do I have some? Yes, got one. Awesome. Come on. All right. Whoops. Get off of that. Okay. Psychologist has set up an experiment. I didn't skip any questions, did I? All right, good. Set up an experiment to study the tendency of a person to select the first item when presented with a series of items. This is hysterical, okay? How many kids do you think chose letter A? I mean, it's about a study to see if you pick the first choice you're presented with. Okay, I thought that was funny. All right. What? Anyway, so they've got 300 people, and they split them into two groups. The first 150, and that first 150, 36 chose that first picture. And then of the last 150, then they said people chose the first picture in the set. Among the remaining 150 participants, that group was what they called it P. If more than 20% of all participants chose the first picture in the set, okay, now I understand it says more than 20%, but we're just going to go with 20%, just for kicks and giggles. So 20% of the total, 300, that's everybody, all the participants that did that. Okay, now, why did I take away the 36? Where did that 36 come from? Yes, sir. The first group. So we had these two groups. You got the first group of 150, second group of 150. Okay? So if you take 20% of 300, isn't that about 60? Right? We know that the number is probably more than 60 because they said P was if more than 20%, so probably more than 60. But we're subtracting out the 36, and P, what's the relationship between the number of people in that second group and the number on the right? Isn't it greater than? Now, do you see that answer listed anywhere? Do you see that answer listed on anywhere on there? It is choice D, folks. Yes, they disguised it by adding the 36 to the other side. Which is ironic that the study was about choosing the first one and their answer was the last one. Oh, interesting. How many sides are there on a cube? 6. So, the area of one of the faces would be A over 4 quantity squared. So that 6 really didn't come into play too much because we know that we've got 6 sides on the whole thing, so we can kind of take that out of the equation. So we know that if you would label all the edges x, then you would, x squared would be the area of one of those. If you were to try to solve that for x, what would you get? what would you do to both sides? Come on, how do you get rid of a square? Square root. Okay, so x equals what? A over 4, right? So that means this side of the rectangle is a over 4, or square, and this side of the square is a over 4, and so is this one a over 4, and so is this one a over 4. Now, remember, it said perimeter of one of the faces. What do you get when you add a over 4 plus a over 4 plus a over 4 plus a over 4? Don't you get 4 times a over 4? Does anybody know what 4 times a over 4 is? A. Not letter A as in choice A, but as in lowercase a, because the 4's cancel, right? The 4's are crossing off right there. No, that's not a 9. That's a bad-looking A. Sorry. Sorry to all the A's out in the world. Anybody lost on that one? So we just had to figure out what each side of each edge was. They told me the area of one face was a over 4 quantity squared, so I just had to take the square root to find the side length, and then multiply by 4 to get the perimeter of one face. Okay, the mean score of 8 players in a basketball game was 14. Oh, where did I get 8 from? Seriously, that's 14 and a half. So what do you get when you multiply 8 times 14 and a half? I know that's a number in the universe, folks, but what am I doing? If I take the average and I multiply it times the number of players. I know it's 14. 14.5 times 8. I know it's 116. 116 what? That's the total number of points that the whole team scored. Now, the assumption I made is that all 8 players all made 14 and a half points. Now, if this is a game of basketball, that's kind of hard to make a half a point. Okay? But that's what I did. I made that assumption so that I could figure out the total number of points. Okay, now we go down to 7 players, and now the average becomes 12. What is the number of points that the 7 players earned if every one of them got 12 points? 84. Now, how the heck are we going to figure out what the highest scoring player got? Subtract them. Thank you very much. So what do we end up with? 32? Yep. So figure out the total. Okay, in the graph of the linear function f is shown in the xy plane, the graph. The slope of the graph of the linear function g, which is not shown, is 4 times the slope of the graph f. Okay, well, what's the slope of this one? Is it up 1 over 2? Now, I would say, everybody wants to say, oh, it's up 1 over 2, right? So it's 1/2. Watch out. Watch out for a scale change. Look at the axes. Make sure they're both the same units. That would be a dirty trick to play on, kids, but, I could see it happening. So the slope of this one is 1/2. If the slope of this one is 4 times that, what's the slope of the other one? 2. Okay. If the function of the graph passes through the point 0, -4, okay, what did they just hand me? What is this cool point of the universe, folks? Anytime you have an x value of 0, they just gave me what? They gave me the y-intercept. Look at that. So now we have the slope and the y-intercept. We got ourselves the equation of a line. And what are they asking me to plug into that line for x? A 9. So if you know what 2 times 9 minus 4 is, you got the answer to this question. That was a pretty cool question. I like that one. I know. Nerdy math people. The equation above defines a circle in the xy plane. What are the coordinates of the center of the circle? Okay, folks, this goes back to, can you complete the square? I know, you didn't want to do that, but it might be better than you think because it's multiple choice. If this, let me give myself a little bit more space. It might, I don't know if I will be able to. Maybe I'll just zoom in. That'll give me more space. Yeah, you get these fat fingers, man. You got to really use the space you've been given. So, oops. X squared plus 20x plus blank plus y squared plus 16y plus blank. And yeah, I'm at the edge. I'm at the edge of my rope. Okay. Now, do you remember what to do to complete the square? Now, by the way, I think I'm going to go through this process with you to show you, remind you about completing the square, but I feel like completing the square is a little bit useless for this particular question. Had they been asking me about the radius of the circle, okay, then it would have been more useful to me. But to ask me about the center, and I'll show you what I mean by that in a second. So do you know what to do? I mean, the old Algebra 2 teachers, they love to take that middle value, cut it in half, and square it. So what is that? $10 squared, anybody? That's 100, right? So if you add 100 to that side, you better add 100 to the other side too. Okay, and if you do the same thing here, same trick here, cut it in half, square it. What do you got? 60 what? 64. So if you add 64 to that side, you better add 64 to the other side. Big question, can you factor this in the circled part right there, the red circle part? Can you factor it? You should be able to factor it because it's a perfect square. What does it factor into? Yeah, x and x. Can you think of two things that multiply together to give you 100 that add up to 20? Right? Both 10s, right? So one way to say that, since they're both the same, is x plus 10 quantity squared. That's what you were trying to go for. What about this one? What does that thing factor into? Y plus 8 quantity squared? Yeah, you're right. Now the other side, folks, has 164, that's 144. But remember, they asked me about the center of this circle. What do you think it is? You can see it right here. It's right there, folks. Now, for those of you wondering about that, remember x minus h quantity squared. We learned about this in geometry class. Y minus k quantity squared equals r squared. Folks, it's the Pythagorean theorem right there. A squared plus b squared equals c squared. But I mean, that's what you learned in geometry about circles. Now, completing the square was kind of a waste of time, and I'll show you what I mean by that. What's the relationship between this number here and this number here. It's half of it, right? What about from here to here? Same thing, half of it. I absolutely did not need to figure out what to add to both sides. I wasted my time. And remember, when you're doing the SAT and ACT, you don't have time to waste. Now, had this question been about the radius of this circle, then, yeah, I would have needed to know. What is the radius of this circle? You can find your answer over here and don't say 144. Think. What? 12, that's right. We took the square root of that. So if they had been asking me about the radius, then I needed to complete the square. And quite honestly, I have a feeling that there are quite a few people who complete the square not realizing that they could have just taken the linear x term, cut it in half, and found b, and y term, and cut it in half and found the other part of b. Is anybody confused about why they're both negative? Anybody confused about why they're both negative? Just curious. Okay, just wanted to make sure. I didn't want to glance over that or gloss over it, one of the two. In the equation above, y equals x squared minus a. A is a positive constant, and the graph of the equation in the xy plane is the parabola. Which of the following is an equivalent form of the equation? Okay. Why is it not D? Why can you definitely say it is not D? What happens if you FOIL that? What do you get? You got your x squared, right? You definitely got your a squared. Well, that's a showstopper right there, isn't it? Yeah. Plus, there's no minus in there. It'd all be plus. And there's a middle term. That's a horrible answer. Is this a difference of perfect squares? Is this a difference of perfect squares? Like, you guys all know that if I had x squared minus 9, you'd all be saying things like, oh, that's x plus 3 times x minus 3, right? You'd be factoring it into that, right? How do you go from x squared to x? What are you doing, really? You took the square root, right? How do you go from 9 to 3? You also took the square root. That's not it. Chief or anybody else? It is choice B. It's a difference of perfect squares, but you're taking the square root. You guys need a coffee break, right? So go to the restroom, go to the drinking fountain, walk somewhere. Preferably don't run into walls. I know several of you are just going to text friends because you don't know anybody and are unwilling to introduce yourself to other people. It's kind of sad, really. All right, let's move on. Already? What do we know about all these answers in this next section? What do we know about all the answers in this next section? They're math related. Woohoo, nice. Yeah, versus Spanish. Yeah? You would like to do the math portion in Spanish?
No.
Oh.
I'm not even in Spanish.
Oh, okay. What do we know about the answers on this next part? What? No negative answers, right? If you end up with a repeating decimal, you can do what with it? You can round it, or you can truncate it, where you just chop it off. Or you can write the fraction, which is always safe. But if you mean 3.5, don't write that, because if you write 3.1/2, it will be counted as 31 halves, not 3.5. So if you mean 3.5, then either write 7 halves or 3.5. And it doesn't matter which position you put them in, starting from left to right. Okay, may the games begin. Horsepower and watts are units of measure of power. They are directly proportional, such that 5 horsepower is equal to 3,730 watts. How much power in watts is equal to 2 horsepower? So 2 horsepower equals, hey, guess what? It's that same K value showing up, but we don't know what this is. So one way to handle it is like this, or we could do this. 5 over 3,730 equals 2 over x. That's another way to handle it. I'm guessing the second way is the way you would want to do it. And how do you handle that? Cross multiply, right? So what is that? Is that 7460? 7460 over 5. If I'm thinking right. I'm just... Oh, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. Really? Oh, that is too funny. Yep, 1492. What? Well, that's what they always say. Columbus, yeah. Columbus sailed the ocean blue. All right. Sorry, a little history lesson thrown in there on top. Sorry, I didn't do it in Spanish. I apologize. All right. Oh, nice. The painting, The Starry Night by Vincent van Gogh, is rectangular in shape. Nice. With height 29 inches. And width 36.25. Okay, so this is one of those geometry questions, not drawn to scale. Whoops. All right. If a reproduction was made where each dimension is 1/3 the corresponding original dimension, what is the height of the reproduction in inches? Really? Is that all they wanted? So the width was absolutely pointless? So they wanted 1/3 of 29? So 29 thirds? I mean, really? I just want to look at the answer because I'm like, am I missing something important here, or is this that easy? Nope, that's it. Now, there are 2 other ways you could write this answer. Can you give me one of them? 9 point. Now, remember, there's only 4 places to fill in, right? So 9.66. This would be called truncating. 9.67 would be the other one. So 3 different ways you can write your answer.
Which one would you do?
I'd probably do 29 thirds. But, you know, math people like fractions. I don't know. I don't know. But, you know, you can go with the decimals. It's not a problem. That is not what I wanted. Let's try that again. Okay. PQ equals RS. What is the length of PS? So what does x minus 1 equal? 3x minus 7. That is so cool because now I can subtract that and add that and find out that x is a whopping what? 3. Of course, then I've got 3 minus 1 plus 3 plus 3 times 3 minus 7. 5 plus 9 is 14. 14 minus 7. Is that 7? That's what it looks like to me. in the XY plane, which would be really cool for a name if I ever own a plane, but probably not going to. The point 25 lies on the graph of the function, okay? If you've got y equals k minus x squared, where k is a constant, what is the value of k? What do you think we should do with the coordinate? Plug it in. Nicely done. K minus 2 squared. All right, so what are you going to add to both sides? Comes after 3. Yes, nicely done. 2 squared is 4, so you would add 4 to both sides. K is 9. I know. Thought it was going to be more complicated than that, but see, some of these questions toward the end that are not multiple choice, they're not too bad. Okay. So, a landscaper is designing a rectangular garden. The length of the garden, oh, lock it in. Length of the garden is 5 feet longer than the width. Okay. If the area of the garden is 104 square feet, well, how do you find area of a rectangle? Length times width, base times height, all those cool things. We know that it's 104. How are you going to solve it? Yes, you do. I know you do. Just think through it with me. What can we do? Distribute the x. So now we have x squared plus 5x equals 104. Now what? Push every term over to the same side. So that you can do what? Factor it. There's no greatest common factor to pull out, so that's not an issue. So we got x and x, right? All right, now what? Can you come up with factors of 104 whose difference is 5? Factors of 104 whose difference is 5. Say that again. Negative 8 and 13? You are correct. Negative 8 and positive 13. Those are the two, because when you check the insides and the outsides, you do get positive 5x. But you would just sit there messing around probably with the calculator until you got it, unless you just really felt like, some of you like factor trees. You could do something like that. You could sit there and mess around with it and say, well, you got 2 and 52. You could go with 4 and 26. You could sit there and start writing out your factors until you found the winning combination that's 5 units away from each other. Okay, so what do you got here? What are my possibilities for x? 8 and negative 13. And why did I just do that? It's a negative number. We know that there are no negative answers in this section. 8 is the only one. Plus, it would be really hard to be the width of the garden to be negative 13. Okay. Point P is the center of the circle in the figure above. What's the value of x? All right. So those are both 20. All right, what are you thinking? did that, would that help? That doesn't seem like that would help. How can I use those 20s? Can I do something like this to help me?
You got a triangle.
I do have a triangle. Now I need to. I'm not getting super excited here, but I do need to figure something out here. Now I know that these are both the same, so I'll call them y. So we know that x plus 2y is equal to what? Isn't that 180? Every triangle has to add up to 180. I'm still not convinced that's super duper helpful.
What's the answer to this?
It says 80, but I got to figure out why. Now, I do understand that what we're getting at in this particular see, that would make y 50, but I don't understand how we can just determine that. If P is the center of the circle in the figure, what is the value? See, I know in geometry class you guys learned about this theorem that talked about how this particular angle was half as big as the arc that it cut off. So I'm trying to figure out how I can then calculate it. Actually is. I'm going to have to think about this one before I get back to you on the answer, because
I remember doing it last year, but I don't remember how to do it.
well, I feel like there's something missing, and obviously I'm missing something.
The inside angle is 80 without the line.
The inside angle. Which inside angle?
One month long.
Yeah, one more line. You take off the line there, and with the curve, that's 80.
How do you know that?
Well, and the tangent is here in 80, right where that point is. And you like 20 from that.
Okay, so the tangent, when you say tangent, you're talking about from here?
Yes,
Okay, so if that's tangent,
that's 180. And then you take out 20 from it.
okay, so that would make, you take out a 20, so that would make this 70 in here. Is that what we're getting at, or are we going the other direction?
That's an 80 on both sides.
80 on both sides. If it's tangent, then that would be perpendicular to that, so how would you have 80 on the other side? Wouldn't it be 70? I'll cheat on this one for just a quick second, because I'm missing something. Maybe I'm just not seeing what you're saying. Points A and B are joined. A and P are joined. Then the triangles that will be formed. Okay. All right. Man, I wish I would have seen that. That kind of depresses me. Watch this. Now you have two triangles. This triangle and this triangle. Those are both isosceles triangles, because two sides of each one of those triangles is a radius of the circle. So that means this is 20 and this is 20 because of that whole base angle thing. So this whole angle right here, angle BAC, is how much? 40. And according to what you learned in geometry class, the arc that it intercepts across from that would be twice as big. And also, according to what you learned in geometry class, the central angle is equal to the intercepted arc. Man, if I'd have just seen that one little thing where you draw that line in, wow, that's a cool question. Made me think. I like that. So I was going about it the whole wrong way. Okay, questions 37 and 38 refer to the following information. Ms. Simon drives her car from her home to her workplace every weekday morning. The table above shows the distance in miles and her average driving speed in miles per hour when there is no traffic delay for each segment of her drive. Okay, one morning, Ms. Simon drove directly from her home to her workplace in 24 minutes. Okay. What was her average speed in miles per hour during her drive that morning? What's the total distance? From home to freeway is 0.6, from freeway to freeway exit 15.4, from freeway exit to workplace 1.4. So we could figure out the total distance, right? Oh. Okay, so how far is it? 17.4 miles. Okay, we want miles per hour, right? How much of an hour is 24 minutes? How much of an hour is 24 minutes? That's 0.4, isn't it? So 17.4 miles divided by 0.4 hours would be my speed. 17.4 divided by 0.4. Wow, that's going to take a long time to get to work, huh? What's the average speed there? 43.5 miles per hour. Man, it would take me forever to get to work. You don't? Depends on the roads that you're on. But yeah, I'm on the interstate, so if I'm only averaging 43.5 miles an hour on the interstate, something is really wrong, either with my car or with traffic. Okay? If Ms. Simon starts her drive at 6:30 a.m., she can drive at her average speed with no traffic delay for each segment of the drive. If she starts her drive at 7 a.m., the travel time from the freeway entrance to the freeway exit increases by 33% due to slower traffic, but the travel time for each of the other two segments of her drive does not change. Based on the table, how many more minutes does Ms. Simon take to arrive at her workplace if she starts her drive at 7 than if she starts her drive at 6:30? Let's see here. 33% more from the freeway exit. Okay. The travel time from freeway entrance to freeway exit increases. That's this one right here, right? The middle one. Oh man, I don't want to mark that. Freeway entrance to freeway exit. All right, so that is my middle one, right? how do I increase that one by 33%? Or, what do I need to do? It says how many more minutes. Don't I just need to figure out what the increase on that one would be? Because the other two are going to stay the same, aren't they? So what's 0.33 times 50? Round your answer to the nearest minute. 17 minutes. I didn't need to figure out the total amount for each, and then subtract two things. I just needed to figure out that one change. What? Salud.
Yeah. But it also means
What else does it mean?
soul is breathing.
Oh. Man, you're like a fountain of knowledge. Okay, question 1, they gave me the y-intercept. Which one of those is the y-intercept? The price of one ticket? Nope. Amount of the service fee in dollars? Total amount in dollars Salim will pay for one ticket? What are you thinking? That's a one-time service fee, isn't it? What's the 15 represent? I know it's the slope of the line, but what is 15 representing? That's the price per ticket, right? Okay, question 2. You've got 60% of one type of product and 40% of another type of product. What does it add up to? I think it's pretty obvious from all the answer choices. 240, right? Which is choice B, I believe. It's the decimal. You definitely need to have that percentage changed to a decimal. Question 3. Nope, not that. You're adding 2 plus 3i and 4 plus 8i. Yes, it is that easy. 6 plus 11i. You don't need to even realize or remember that I is the square root of -1. You're just adding them together. Okay? So in this particular problem, FOIL, px times px, that's p squared x squared. Well, what do we know? The x squareds are useless to me. P squared has to be 4. So what's the only thing that would work? 2. Question 5, the only thing that has a slope of 2 and a y-intercept of -5 looks like the one at the bottom right corner. I mean, C has a slope of 2, but has a positive y-intercept. Yep, question. Yes, so it has to go up to the right because it's a positive. So I could get rid of that choice immediately. Okay. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. I mean, like, that's, we all, I knew as soon as you looked at it, you'd see it. That's what we're all in here for, is to learn this stuff or to be reminded of stuff we haven't thought about in a while. Okay, so I took the 18 and I plugged it in there. All right, and that's what gave me x to be 12. Now, for those of you who are sitting there going, well, how am I going to multiply by, 18 by, okay, so 3 goes into 18 how many times? 6 times. So this is 2 times 6, which is 12. And then I just plugged that into the other one, right? 2 times 12 minus 3, and that's where I got my 21 from. So, I know. All without calculator. All right, okay. The record shows. Okay, question 7. What does it mean by correctly expresses L? What does that mean? You kind of get a clue from all the answer choices.
They're all equal.
Solve for L. So what should you divide both sides by? 7H. So whatever has N over 7H. Choice C. All right, now I stared at this one for a little bit, trying to figure out if there was a trick. All right, then realized that there wasn't. They're actually asking me to add the two values together. All right, now if you add these two numbers together, what do you get? Do you get 1? No, that's not a good choice. By the way, how many of you chose 5 at the bottom? I hope not, because it wasn't even an answer choice. Sorry, I just thought I'd ask. Okay, so it is 2 right there. You could see that 3 plus -1 does give me 2. That is the answer to my question. Wow, packing up. Oh, see, we were having so much fun. Okay, all right.